Welcome back to Without a Doubt, the podcast. A podcast where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We're the ones who believe in creating our own paths and living our truths out loud. Join in on an honest and open conversation about self-discovery and growth. I'm your girl Mad, your host. I'm a freelance entrepreneur, a 30-something-year-old human that has never exactly done what is expected of me. I'm a sprinkle of reality, glimmer of sunshine, and as unfiltered as they come. I'm here to remind you that it's okay to do life a little bit differently, and that you don't have to be what is expected of you, and that your happiness, it matters. I hope you guys are loving the guest episodes that I've released in the last 20 whatever episodes. It does seem to reflect in the stream, so if there is something on my podcast that you're loving and you really are enjoying, share it with me. Send me a DM, send me an email. If you know my number, send me a text. I really am still experimenting here with this podcast, and in order to grow and evolve, I'm going to need to know what you want to hear. So thanks for being here as always. I seriously appreciate you. Rate, subscribe, share, follow, do all the things that engage with this podcast. Please and thank you, because it does help this podcast grow. And if you have been doing it, I cannot thank you enough. I see it and I appreciate you. This is another fun guest episode, actually, where I talk to Gabrielle Wildheart. She's an artist who went from street busker to freelance muralist and making art full-time. She lives in Washington. She actually lives off an island 20 minutes from Seattle, which you have to get to by boat. She lives in a rural area, and she totally leans into who she truly is. She shares her story about how she became an artist. We talk about sparking creativity, how one call could be the door opener to an entire opportunity, and how art isn't always something you have to monetize, but you totally can. You know what? Let's just roll into this, because I really enjoyed this episode, and I think you will too. Here we go. Why don't you break down a little intro of yourself, and everybody can find a little bit about who Gabrielle Wildheart is. Actually, I met you as Gabrielle Abbott, so I think that's another cool little part of who you are too, so go for it.
Okay, so I am Gabrielle Wildheart, recently Wildheart, previously Abbott. We just got married, my husband and I, a couple months ago, and went through that whole conversation of, do I take your name? Do we combine our names? And we explored a lot of options, and the one that felt right was to actually come up with a totally new name and both change our names to that. So we settled on Wildheart, which was partly inspired because my grandmother's maiden name was Hart. And so that combined with Wild is kind of, or Wilder, is a common surname. So it actually felt like, okay, this could hypothetically be a real surname. It's not too out there, but it also means something to us. We love it. So now we are the Wildhearts, and I'm in the mind-breaking process of changing all my cards and legal stuff. If you've ever done a name change, you know.
But no, I haven't, but I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah. So that's the story of the name. It is my legal name right now. And I am a full-time artist. I make my living mostly doing murals and public art, and I also have a studio practice where I paint my own things, and then I do a little design work on the side and consulting. I think being an artist is often a juggle of many different income streams and products and services, and so that is what my career looks like, but I love it. I work for myself. I've been doing art professionally for almost 20 years. I started selling my first pieces when I was 18, and I'm 37 now. And I have been full-time at it for 6 years. And in that period from 18 to about 31, when I was building my career, I worked as a waitress and a nanny and a cleaner and all sorts of different jobs to make ends meet while steadily building my art career up. And eventually I was able to go full time with it. And I am now making more doing art than I ever did at any of my, 9-to-5s before that. So that's a really wonderful feeling. And I just plan to continue expanding from here, sky's the limit.
And what kind of art do you say you would do? So if somebody's listening to this, they're like, there's a very broad range in the art world. So what kind of art? I see it. So share what you kind of
Totally. So My interest in art started with portraiture, and when I was 20 years old, I went to a portrait painting apprenticeship thinking I am going to be a traditional realist portrait artist. And I studied how to do hyperrealism, paint things that look like photos, make my own oil paints, use canvases, all these traditional materials. Went through this 3-year program. At the end of it, realized that's not what I wanted to do. I think this often happens to people in college, whatever you study. But I love painting realistically. I love painting people, but I didn't want to limit myself just to portrait commissions. And so where that has led me is now I do public art murals, I do illustration and design, but I often incorporate faces, people, realism, but I combine it with a lot of other styles as well. So sometimes I'll have like a goddess figure, and her face is really realistic, her eyes are really three-dimensional, but behind her is a lot of kind of psychedelic shapes or bold splashes of color and just more expressive, expansive imagery. So I like to say I kind of blend old techniques with new modern colors and symbols.
Your stuff is definitely very bright colored, a lot of the stuff I've seen. So I think that's what maybe drew me in when I like clicked over to your Instagram. And I like some of those things. So
Thank you.
It's different, it's not what art is different. No matter what kind of art you do, everybody's art is going to look different, even if you try to copy somebody else's.
Yep.
Yours has it definitely has its own style.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's important to find your own style. That's honestly the advice that I always give to artists when they're first starting out is to just work on your art. It's so tempting to try and make money from it right away. And if you can do that, great. But I think it takes a lot of time to figure out your style. Just like, all of us, it takes time to figure out who we are, right? And art is so personal and it's going to change. And so you have to really spend time trying different techniques, trying different mediums, trying different styles, all of it before you figure out what is really yours and what really comes from you. And it's fine to try and, sell things in the meantime, but it's more important that you give yourself that space to really explore who you are creatively and room to try things and fail. And the business side will come. It will like gel. But, for me, like I said, I worked as a waitress, and I think that was one of the best things I did for my career was to take the pressure off making art initially and give me that space to really explore. And then I could still pay my bills because, if you're stressed about money, you're not creative at all. So it's really important to manage that side of things too.
It's crazy. I say that all the time. Like I wouldn't consider myself an artist. I'm definitely a creative. I mean, people would see some of my stuff and be like, Madison, you are very artsy. But I wouldn't say like, oh yeah, I'm an artist. That's kind of like a silly thing to say. I think most people can be artists, right? We all can put a pen to paper. You can doodle anything and it'd be your own art. You can paint whatever and it can be your own art. But 100%. I've seen you spend a lot of time, money, a lot of time in your craft, a lot of money in coaching and things. And I think you just really went full force into something that you love. But don't you ever have times where you just like don't want to do any of the murals, or you're not interested in painting and like creating even now with feeling like you're okay with financials, you're not struggling, but do you ever not want to get up and do anything?
Oh yeah, it's still sometimes the hardest thing in the world to get in front of the easel, which is crazy because it's also my favorite thing to do. But I think just sometimes we resist what we're meant to do. We're lazy. I don't know. So and I think
you're not lazy. We need to. I just saw a post on this, and I was like, I'm going to work on this because I say I'm lazy too, but then my girlfriend's like, Madison, you run circles around me. Like I'm doing one thing and you've done like 500 things. Like my slow is still too slow. My fast is still too slow for you. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think like we all think like, okay, I didn't do enough. I'm too lazy. I saw this post and the girl's like, you're not lazy. Like you're just something in you is like, you just need to be unproductive. You just need to take a minute. And being unproductive sometimes and maybe not doing art, or for me, sometimes like taking a step back, even from editing my podcast. I do a lot of social media content creation. Like that's really how I find my way through income, right? So when I'm working that and I'm doing those, sometimes like I do not want to sit down and edit. I do not want to do this. I'm like, girl, you need to do it. And
Yeah.
but taking the steps to not, when I'm not doing it, sometimes it just like gives me that little revitalized to get back to it. You
That's
know,
so true. It's part of the
the
process.
laziness we need,
Yeah.
you need rest. It's not lazy. I think lazy, we use that word too loose now. I don't think we're lazy. If you're making your
Yeah.
own money, there's no way that you're lazy.
That's a great point. And I think too, it comes from the capitalist ideas and paradigm that we live in, which kind of brings me back to something you said earlier, just about us all being creative and artistic. And I like to think about how the whole concept of art is something that was created, right, in Western culture. If you go back to our Paleolithic ancestors, right, they're all making art. All their tools are art. Their clothing's art. They're all artists. And this idea of art as this separate thing that some people do or some people are good at is a kind of new concept in our human history that is also localized to certain cultures like ours. And then we not only do that, but then we try and fit it also into the capitalist productivity, where if you're an artist, you need to be doing it for 8 hours a day. And none of this is natural. None of this is what art is really about. So it's good to have grace. And like, I try to remind myself sometimes, walking my dog or just staring out the window. These are all part of my creative process too.
Yeah, I love that. Like sometimes that's exactly what I do when I need a break. I'm like, let's just go for a walk with the dog because I just need to get away from whatever I'm doing, go outside. And like I said earlier, I'm a nature person. You're obviously a nature person too.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I feel like that's where a lot of my creative juices are flowing when I'm not sitting down doing my craft.
Yeah.
And I think when you said earlier, you're like, people want to make art and then make money from it. And I think it's really hard to make money from your art. I think especially art you like to make, not you necessarily, but any person, because art is very personal. And what you think is pretty, someone else might not think is pretty. But I'm on the opposite spectrum. I make things and then I'm like, ugh, that isn't that great. And people are like, Madison, that is so good. Like, how did you paint that? Or I dabble in a lot of shit. Like, I will try it. I have a whole box of wooden, not upcycled, trashed wood that I pick up on our walks, and I'll paint on them, and I'll paint like plants, or my mom has them hanging in her house, and I think it's really cute because I'm like, they're not that good, but they're like, these are good, like people would buy this, and I'm like, but then I have to go to a market, and I have self-doubt, and I'm like, who would buy that? How much would I sell it for? Would someone want to spend $30 on something like that?
Right.
I think it's hard to be an artist. I truly think, like, I know you say, like, it's kind of a path in the career world in capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're banking on making art to live your life.
Totally. And the business side of it is totally separate from the creative side of it. And like what you're describing with collecting wood and getting inspired and making something to decorate your home, that is such a fundamentally universal and natural human desire to do that. We all have that desire. We'll collect rocks, we sew things, we decorate. I mean, this is the artist in all of us, right? And that doesn't necessarily have to be an income stream to be good or valuable. Yet the path of the artist in Western culture to say, I'm a professional artist, you do have to make money from it. And that's a totally different skill set. And it was really revolutionary for me. And I was about 20, maybe 24 when I realized that. And at that point, I had already been through art school. I'd done a bunch of training. I was like, hey, I'm really proud of my craft. I feel really confident in my ability to paint and use different mediums. But I'm completely lost when it comes to making money. And at that point, I was working as a street busker. And that's actually how my professional career started.
So like, okay, street busking, like, what way?
Yeah, so
singing, art, what?
Artwork.
Okay.
So I moved to Florence, Italy when I was 20 to do this portrait painting apprenticeship, which I mentioned in the beginning. It was a school called the Florence Academy of Art that focuses on really traditional techniques, right? And I planned to only stay 6 months. I took out a loan. I asked my parents for some money. I had dropped out of another art school to do this. It wasn't an accredited program. I just knew, like, I need to learn how to be a really good painter, and this is the way I'm going to do it. So I went, and then after 6 months, I was like, I don't ever want to leave. How do I stay here for the rest of my life? So I ended up getting a job as a nanny and working as a street busker in Florence, Italy. And what I would do was I would copy Renaissance paintings in chalk on the sidewalk. So if you've ever seen like those kind of, there's some three-dimensional artists that do it where they look like there's holes. So I wasn't doing the holes, but I was copying paintings from the museums in Florence. And I would do it every weekend. And it's actually a traditional art form in Italy. It's called Madonnaro art, which means those who paint the Madonna, because it's a Catholic culture. They would originally, the artists would only paint the Virgin Mary. Now they paint everything. But there's a street painting guild in Florence. So I became a member of this guild. I paid a couple euros every week for the permit to draw on the sidewalk. And I would post up outside these tourist centers, and there'd just be this steady stream of tourists. They'd go to the museum, they'd see the birth of Venus, come out, they'd then see my birth of Venus on sidewalk chalk, give me a bunch of coins, and that was how I funded my studies and stay. It was actually pretty lucrative. But when I did move back to the States 3 years later, I was, trying to do that in rainy Seattle. It wasn't quite working. People weren't, didn't have the mindset that it's a historic art form.
I was going to ask,
like, what is this?
I was thinking because I don't know, I had a thought when you were saying that. I'm like, I always think if I moved away, like I used to waitress. I mean, I've done everything. I was a nanny. I waitress. I've done a lot of the same kind of odd jobs. I always say that if I moved away somewhere else, I would probably go back to waitressing or go back to more of a job that people would consider on the lower totem pole. But here where I live, I know so many people. South Florida is very, very, very big, but it's also very, very, very small. Somehow I know someone everywhere. It sounds crazy and it sounds but I was a fitness coach at a few studios here in South Florida, and I happen to know a lot of people in a lot of different places. And it's just my mom, this is the best way. My mom started working at she started waitressing again a year ago, and she's in her 60s, and people see my mom and they're like, what are you doing working here? And it's not that I think anybody would look down on me. I just don't want or need questions. So I'm like, I don't think I would go back to waitress, but I would go somewhere else. I'd move to some small ass town and work at a diner, and I wouldn't care. Because nobody knows me. And I wouldn't need to deal with criticism or judgment. But I think when you were saying, oh, I was doing that. I was doing chalk artwork on the sidewalk there. And then you come back here. People look down on that here. Maybe not necessarily, but when you see people on the street asking for money, they're panhandling here in Florida. Or, we don't have people that do that here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as you travel the United States, and you see people doing that, you're like, why are they sitting here asking for money? People don't look at it as much of an art form, maybe like they do there. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that was just a thought that came to my mind. I'm like, how did you feel coming back and doing that here?
Interesting.
People weren't receptive.
I went back to Seattle and I thought, okay, well, this worked in Italy. I'll see what I can do in downtown Seattle. So I went, down in front of H&M and Zara, in the little downtown core, and I started doing my drawing. About an hour into it, I had just done kind of the face and the eyes. A policeman came up to me and said, you have to stop. This is, private property. But this is very cool. And I like this. And I've never seen anything like this before. And while I have to ask you to stop, I'm also going to call the director of the Seattle Downtown Parks Association, who does all the street permitting. And this police officer, bless him, called this director, sent her a photo of what I was doing, and she said, let's get her back and let's pay her, but let's do it legally with a permit. So then 2 weeks later, I was kind of permitted and they gave me a special spot. And for that whole summer, I was able to draw and busk and kind of be sponsored as part of the downtown association's permitting cool. Public art stuff. So that was kind of my first foray into public art. But I quickly realized I wasn't going to make the same amount of tips in downtown Seattle as I did in touristic Italy. But having that into the programming department of the city kind of opened my eyes that there's this whole world of public art out there, and that really was where the money was going to be for me, if I could connect to people who could then connect me to like the greater world, and that's
life.
So, yeah,
I hate to say it, it is who you know.
Yeah.
if that policeman wasn't as nice as he was, then he could have been an asshole cop like a lot of them are, and could have just said, "This is private property. You can't be here."
Yeah, here's a ticket, right?
Yeah, or he could have just said, "You got to go. I'll wait for you to leave," and you could have went on your merry way. But he didn't. He was like, "You're awesome, and I'm gonna try to figure something out for you." And then like, it took one person to make a little like pivot in your path and kind of put you on the route you needed to go.
Absolutely.
It's crazy that it just took one person to tell you, hey, this is what I can do for you. And it is about who you know or who you meet. And I think that's really cool, though. That's a really cool story about that.
It was a good lucky break for sure. And then it took work from there too. I went on to study the business of art. I took a lot of classes, and as you mentioned, I've invested a ton of money in coaching and mentorship, and then I did go on to grad school. So I don't think schooling is necessary for everyone, like traditional university schooling anyways, but I do think mentorship is important, and getting coaching is important, learning is important. It'll just speed the process up for you. If you can find somebody to ask, like, what do I need to do next? Can you give me feedback on what I'm already doing? These kind of things are so important. So
it also helps alleviate some of the frustrations in moving forward, because I don't have a mentor or anything. And I know, like, when you say those things, I think about it all the time, and I saw your reel about how much you actually put into your education and coaching and mentorship.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And I mean, I will link your Instagram into my show notes, so please go check her page out. Go check out her art so you know what we're talking about here. But I am one of those people that I'm like, you also don't need to go to college. I wish I would have went to college for business, like how you said, because I'm very creative minded. I'm very idea smart. Like, I have a lot of things that I'm like, wow, this could be this. But I never really went to school for business. I went to school for liberal arts and anthropology. And that's nothing what I'm doing with now. I resell, I do all e-commerce and content work. So I'm doing something totally opposite. And truthfully, truthfully, somebody should have been like, Madison, you should really go to business school. You have like all these ideas. You want to make money. Like, I just think I had that idea set even when I was in high school, but nobody pushed me or guided me like that. And now as I've gotten older or graduated college, I'm like, maybe I should go back and take business classes. Maybe I should invest.
I wonder if the business world was different when you were in high school.
That was in 2000. 2008 is when I graduated. So I'm a few years younger than you, but I mean, e-commerce is different, but I still think it can help you. Like, a business plan is a business plan.
Absolutely.
If you know how to create a business plan and you know how to move forward with your business plan, you can be successful if you have the drive, the purpose, and the network. You need your network of people. And I just think, like, I have networks of people. I have this, but nobody ever was like, Madison, here's how you do this. My grandpa was a businessman. My aunt was a businesswoman. Like, my mom owned her own business. A lot of people. But none of those people in my bucket have that business plan idea of like what you were saying. It's different. Now I'm doing online. But I think, like, if they were like, here's how to do this, I would have been more interested. It's just, as I've gotten older, I try to think, like, if I had kids, which I don't want, but I would try to, what are they interested in? What are things that they bring to light that without my recommendation? I think my parents were very like, you should do this, you should do that. You talk a lot. Like, so I just think it's interesting to hear that path that you went artsy, but you also invested in the schooling for it. So you were like, I fucking have to do this after all the money I spent.
Yeah.
Imagine if you weren't doing that right now, you would probably.
Oh God, I'd be so sad. But I also really knew, that's the other thing, is that I knew rock solidly that this was what I wanted to do. And so it was easy to take those risks and those leaps of faith. And part of that is I had family that really supported me. I was interested in art in an early age, and then I got the message and the feedback back from the adults in my life that that would be a good thing for me to do. Nobody said you can't do that, you won't make money at it. What I always heard was you can do that if you want to, but you have to work hard at it just like any other path, And so I was encouraged to seek out learning.
What did your parents do for work?
Well, that's part of it. My mom's a writer, so she's a self-employed creative, and then my dad's a family therapist. So,
Okay.
Kind of open-minded guy, but also self-employed. So they know the alternative path, and we're not scared by it. But I think a lot of people turn their kids off from doing what they really want because they're worried their kids are going to fail and be starving, and they don't want that for their kids. Understandable, but like the world is so different now with the internet. It's the best time it's ever been to do something alternative, for women to own their own businesses. I think it's so exciting, and if you just learn how to navigate that, you can do anything. It's incredible.
Yep, it's 100. You're 100% in it. It is a time to be alive. I'm not a huge lover of the internet. I think the internet is a cursing and a blessing all at the same time. And I think it creates a lot of divide, and it brings us together. It's, it's like an ever changing thing like this for me. I have my moments where I love it and I hate it. But I think if there's one thing, you can make money sitting at home doing nothing. You could literally make money off your cell phone. You don't even need a computer to make money. And I think like that's one of the craziest. You just need a Wi-Fi connection and an iPhone and Android, anything that's got some sort of any smartphone. And a lot of the boomers and especially Kendra's life, my girlfriend, they are like not understanding that you can make money online. Like when I started, even my mom, when I was making money through Facebook for a while, well, they got rid of a lot of their programming, but I can't even believe the money that I was making off Facebook just for posting videos, like reels. I was getting paid by the views, and I had some videos hit millions of views.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't get paid very much. Like when I tell you I was getting paid like 0.0003 cents a view. That's shit, right? Like what? My mom was like, "What do you mean Facebook paid you? What do you mean you got a paycheck from? What do you mean for 6 months you've been making that much money?" And I was like, "I've just been creating content. I've been doing, this is my art that I've been putting my videos together. My creations are all, and I've just been putting them out to the world." And she was like blown away. I don't think she even had that understanding. And then when she was like, "Okay, well, you can make money doing this. You're making money off ads that so-and-so's putting on your videos." I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's a different time. Like,
yeah,
you don't realize. So cool. It is really cool. But I think I'm more hands-on. So this side of the work that I'm doing now, like the content creation part, isn't really my purpose and passion. Like I envy the people like you who really were able to hone in on something that is a purpose. Like it's really your purpose in light. Like you seem to, it's you. It encompasses you. When you popped on the screen, now I get it. I'm like, oh, this is totally the girl I see on Instagram. Like your art encompasses you. So it's crazy. I'm like, I need to find that in myself too. Like we're all on our own journeys, So I just think
thank you for that reflection. I think I worked hard to bring into congruence my real life with my Instagram life. And obviously Instagram is the highlights reel, but I think that it makes it a much healthier place to be and to interact with when it's honest, and it's not always honest. We've all probably had the experience. Like I've met some influencers, for example, that I follow in real life, and you meet them in real life and they're like weird, toxic people, or they're horribly unhappy. And, it's really, it's a strange world out there in social media.
It is strange. I mean, I've done, I was actually in a multi-level marketing company, and it's, a lot of the girls at the top of these businesses are influencers. And like one of the girls was like just like one level up for me, and I was doing really well in this business. Like I was getting awards and I was doing well, and she didn't even know who I was. And you would meet her and she like couldn't even, it wasn't even the person that she portrayed on social. And I'm like, who is this? This is the top, like this is not somebody. I'm making her money and she could give two fucks about who I am and what I'm doing for her corporation and her downlines. I mean, I'm still making money doing all that, which is insane, but I don't promote it, and I don't. social media and
Yeah.
how you make money online is wild.
Yeah.
It is the wild, wild west. I do believe that because there's so many ways to do it. But like I said, I think the toxic influencer, that's when I realized it the most. Like you said, you've met some. I'm like, yeah, I met some. And I was like, why am I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to be, I don't want anybody to look at me and be like, I want to be that girl. I don't want that. I want you to look at me and be like, I could do that. I could be happy like that. I could make my own business. I could start a podcast. I want to influence you, maybe encourage you, I guess.
Yeah.
I want to motivate you, but I
Right.
don't want to influence you to buy a Stanley Cup because that's not who I am.
Well, and I just had a thought too that it's when you look at somebody's profile and you feel inspired, that's really different than feeling envious or intimidated. And a lot of times, perfectly curated profiles, they do make us feel envious or, you know, kind of intimidated. Why isn't my life that perfect? Why don't I live in an Instagram worthy house that's never dirty, or, you know, all these things? And that's such a different experience than somebody's who's authentic. And when you feel inspired, and that's empowering for all of us, you know, I think that's such a more valuable contribution to the world. If you're going to be like, you know, being on social media and creating content, inspiring others rather than, you know, showing off for them.
It's
like
easier
lift
to,
everybody else up with you
but
instead.
it's easier for people to show off. And I've
It
come to
is
that
easier,
conclusion.
yeah.
It's easier
Right,
to
'cause
brag or lie.
Yeah, it's less vulnerable, right? I walked into town, in a little small town where I live, and discovered a textile and sewing shop that I'd never seen before. And I'm like, huh, you know, it's funny. I've lived here several years, never noticed this place. I go in, and it was this workshop of this master artisan textile artist. And it's actually a collective. There were several, and the women in there, they sew these amazing clothes. There was kimonos and jackets and repurposed materials, and one of them was dyeing them by hand with botanical dyes. The stuff was beautiful. And I'm talking to these women, and they're all in their like 60s. And I'm like, you know, how do I find you guys online? Like, I can't believe I've never noticed you guys. Like, all the young yoga girls in this town would love these silk kimonos. Like, I can't believe you're not doing more business. Well, they didn't have a website. They didn't have social media. They were completely kind of unsure how to engage with the internet. And I was thinking about, you know, boomers, that generation. We were talking about boomers a minute ago, how there actually is a ton of knowledge and wisdom and mastery in that generation. These people have built careers, and yet it's not necessarily reaching some of the younger generation, especially I think people who maybe like Gen Z, not to call out, because I love Gen Z, but like this idea that, you know, oh, how, you know, how good you are is reflected in how many Facebook followers or Instagram followers, TikTok you have or whatever. Well, that completely cuts out the older generations that don't know how to be on those platforms. But yet there's all this mastery and information there if we can like connect with it. So I think it's, you know, it's important to also like look off those platforms and kind of find the mentors and the elders in real life and make that bridge, because they're not necessarily able to do it themselves.
But it's like, if we could make that bridge, you know, imagine like if somebody, a Gen Zer that is looking to create something, you can teach that generation and create the bridge and help them grow that textile shop into a viral, sold out entity, you know? If somebody came in and was like, listen, I could help you with this, we could do this. And like the policeman, the one policeman that said to you,
right.
You know what I'm saying? It just takes one person. And I think that's a really interesting thought, is like, because my mom says this to me all the time, like, if I could just make a video, I'm like, you can make a video. This is what you do, prop up your phone and hit record. It's not that hard, right? But then she's like, then who's going to edit it? Who's going to sit down? I'm like, I'll do that. But it is time. It is money. And people want to be paid for their time. Yeah. And I think, you know, the Gen Z has that, you know, you're like, they have this thought process. I was just talking about this with somebody else. They have this thought process where it's easier for them to make money online because this is how they were raised. The internet has been there. Being a YouTube sensation and YouTube star is like everyone's goal that was born in 2000 and 2001. Do you know? If you were born in the 90s or before 2000, I truly think, you know, you didn't have a computer probably growing up until you were like in middle school or high school. And that was me. I didn't have a computer until middle or high school. My dad bought me a cell phone But my mom was not happy about it because my mom's like, who's going to pay for it? She's going to go over her text charges. Like it was like per text, you got like 20 cents, you know? My mom, things were different then. Now everything is at the tips of the, like it's at your fingertips. You can do anything you want. And Gen Z has this like idea that I don't have to work that hard. I could just put out content, make money, become an Instagram influencer, a YouTube star, and make money. But all of that takes work.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
It's a lot, but I think we could all band together. This is where we need to work better as humanity and help the older generation learn the internet, learn social media, learn how to use even Instagram or TikTok. Or I think it's my favorite when I watch older people on social media and they're making videos, not the younger
Totally. People. Oh, they're so great. They're so real. They're so funny. Yeah.
And they're themselves. They don't have a filter on. The lighting is yellow. Like, I'll watch those first. And I don't know why it's more authentic. And I think maybe our generation, the millennial plus, we like more authentic things because everything filtered in, everything's so phony and fake these days. I truly believe that. So I don't know.
I'm in a different phase of life too. I wonder how much that it is. Because when I think about myself in my early 20s, and my thinking was so much more black and white, and I was really drawn to following celebs and pop stars in a way that I don't care about now. I think maybe I was, when you're finding yourself and figuring out your path, the sparkly things are a lot more interesting because they're aspirational. But then you kind of come over a certain crest, get more grounded in who you are, and also realize how complex and nuanced life is. And maybe you've made mistakes and you've had to be forgiven or forgive yourself, and it becomes a lot more interesting to see people that are not so perfect. And the reality and the authenticity is a lot more valuable.
Yeah, I think social media is becoming more authentic, though. I think more people are watching more of the authentic things. And I had this thought, we were just talking earlier about how us younger people, I feel like even the Gen Z, we need to help the older generations learn all these things. I actually had a friend, she's a realtor, and she was like, can you help me make reels? And I was like, sure. I ended up becoming like an Instagram coach. I'm like, sure. I was coaching one-on-one doing that. And I'm like, I think that's one of the cool things. Like, social media gave me an opportunity to make money in other ways I never thought. Like, I might have made money off my videos, but now I'm making money coaching somebody on how to just make a video. And to watch her actually do it was even cooler. And she's 50 something years old and uses it for her business. It wasn't like, I'm getting on here to show you my life and what I cook. She's like, I am trying to market myself. Teach me the ways and I will pay you because I need to adapt to this new way of making money, essentially, because that's how she makes money online. You find new people to buy your houses. And I think it was really cool. And I had a moment in that time, I'm like, Madison, maybe you're missing the mark on some things. Maybe you could do this too. And then after a few sessions, I love her and it was great. Everything was wonderful. But I'm like, I don't think I could do this. I think I would get frustrated when people weren't I wasn't seeing them put in the work, because that's kind of how I get.
Yeah. Hard work is important. That's something that is a kind of interesting conversation right now. There's all this talk about being in your feminine and letting things come to you. And I love that. I love being in my feminine and letting things come to me. Also, I know that hard work in my life has been so important. It's like the fires of transformation. That's how you grow. That's how you expand out of your comfort zone. It takes hard work. It's I never wanted to value that. What?
Like that nitty gritty work.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm definitely, I like the hardworking people, and I think you can respect the hardworking people a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of the show Survivor?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Kendra and I watched this a lot. We used to watch it growing up, and then we fell off for a while, and then we started watching this current season that's on. It just ended, but we went back and started watching from season 30. And it's interesting to see how the show has evolved. But there's a part in this show where they make these people work really hard for a cup of rice. And I'm like, I don't think I'd work that hard for a cup of rice. And then I'm like, but you know what? If you're that hungry and you really need something and you really want something and you're really going for $1 million, like, are you going to work hard? You're going to do what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, like, people were literally saying, this is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life for some of the challenges they had to do. It was just like, carrying logs up and down these hills. That's all that they were doing. But it was hard work. And I'm like, people don't do that, like, hard work anymore. That's why we don't have farmers in America anymore. People don't want to be dirty and do the hard things. They want to make money online and get views for their videos and sit nice and comfortable in their house. Like, but I don't know.
Makes me think of that show where people go in the Arctic. What is that called? When they like alone in the wilderness or something. Yeah.
Is it on Netflix? I haven't watched
that
one, but I've seen it.
Well, it's similar, in that they drop them off in a frozen tundra and like make them survive. And
I would die.
And one of the things I noticed, obviously it takes a lot of hard work for all of them to not, die in the first 3 nights. But one of the interesting things is, they track them like over, I think it's a couple months, and see kind of who can survive the longest. And then obviously if anyone gets in a life-threatening situation, the helicopter comes in and they take them out. But the people that were the finalists, you could kind of predict it, because in the very first few episodes they were setting up their shelters and making their fires, but then when that was done, they were continuing to do stuff. They were more productive. They were making art. Like one person, with his free time, he made us a bunch of playing cards off of birch bark, and then he had a thing to do in the following weeks when he was like sitting in his little hut. Another woman, she skinned a squirrel, and because she's eating it, right? But she didn't just throw away the skin, she made herself a beautiful scarf from it. So there was the kind of interesting mentality of the winners, where they were like, I'm going to put in that extra effort and I'm going to make it fun and I'm going to be creative with it. And all the people that did that were the ones that were still going like 2 months later. So
that made me think, like, do you think you're probably going to feel like when you finish a piece of artwork, you finish something, for me, when I finish a project I'm doing, I feel like ecstatic. I don't know what little burst is going off. All that like serotonin in my brain is like, I'm doped up on something. Even if I don't think it was the best thing I've ever done, I'm like, I finished something. I did that. And I mean, imagine being out there alone, freezing. I would be frozen to death, like you heard me say. But you're out there and you're doing those little, like, I call them sparks of joy for yourself, and you make something. Like, to think you made yourself a scarf, like, I made that. Like, that is a little click of your day that is going to bring up your spirits. And I do think happier people live longer,
Absolutely.
And I think creating, and not just creating, but creating the sparks, because it's easy to just like, okay, I'm going to fold this piece of paper into a star. Okay, that's one thing. But imagine you made 1,000 paper stars, and then you could make something really pretty out of that. It's not just one little thing. It's like a collective of small things that you made. And that probably made their journey so much, like you said, not just productive, but more fun. It's supposed to be fun out here.
Creating the sparks. That's a great line. That's what it's all about, and you have to do that all the time. Like, even if you're working in an office job or just having to clean your house or whatever, like, how can you create the spark in that? That's
it's hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes creativity. It takes thinking outside the box a lot of the time, which drives me crazy that we then like hamper that development in students by not giving them art classes, or like not encouraging them to think creativity, when it's literally the thing that's going to make us happiest.
When I think about going to school, I think about art class, which I enjoyed the most. Like, ceramics is what I took in high school. I still have some of the ceramic things I made.
That's awesome.
I think about I actually have my art stuff like hanging. We have it on our gallery wall. Kendra and I both have artwork from first and kindergarten, believe it or not.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's in our house. And I think this is a really good story to share. And you'll probably really love this. I do think that children, we lose this childlike sense of creativity as we get older. Why? Because people tell you, like, oh, that's not good. Like, oh, you drew that fish? That is not a good fish. You know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't look like a realistic fish. You're like, bitch, this is my doodle. Who cares what it looks like to you? It looks like a fish to me. But when you're a kid, you just draw things. You don't draw them thinking it's going to look bad. You're like, this is my house, and it literally is like 8 lines, and you're good with it. When you get older, your house has to have a pot. You draw everything on it. The tiles, you know, everything gets more intricate. But when you're a child and you're drawing things, your like subconscious is in those pieces of art and you don't even realize. And I'm telling you how I know this, because the stuff on my wall literally reflects who I was and who I am now. And it reflects Kendra. She drew something like, it was like an ocean theme. The girl loves the water. She loves the sea. She loves like anything ocean related is my girlfriend. Everyone knows that. She drew rainbow fish. She drew a rainbow heart. She's as gay as they come. I know that sounds so cliche. But not just that, the fish have bubbles. And the fish, like, they were breathing underwater. And all of the animals are like, and the fish are like talking to one another. And the fish are having babies. Like, there's babies coming out of the bottom. And she was like 6 years old, 7 years old. Imagine all of those thoughts, like the creative that she has. And that artwork actually won her a prize in like the county fair or whatever, county artwork in first grade, right? When you look at that, I'm like, that is her. She like loves the ocean and rainbows, and she's gay and loves love. And my artwork is like nature. I drew trees and flowers, and I'm obsessed with flowers. And it's rainbow. It was rainbow dot art. That's what I had to do in the kindergarten, you know? But they are who? That's the stuff I like to draw, and I'm all about plants. It's weird. It is weird how our child, like, imagery and mental things like that kind of are who we are as we grow older, but you kind of start to pocket who you are and what you like based off of what people tell you you can and cannot be.
Yeah. And I love what you're describing. There's so much actual love in these drawings. You know, it's the things you loved as a child. It's the expression of your love for the world. There's excitement and passion. And I mean, that's what it's all about. And if you studied anthropology, you'll love this. There's an art anthropologist, Ellen Dissanayake, who I studied in college. And I remember her saying that art is the act of making something special. Art is an expression of love. And that was actually so important for our survival, not only just for saying, hey, like, you know, don't go down this path, maybe go down this one. We'll make a nice marker that's really pretty so that you remember, but also just to bind communities together, to keep our spirits up, to get us through hard things. Like, it's this act of expressing love, and that was a survival skill. And I love that. It's so clearly in your childhood art. It's so beautiful.
It is wild. I mean, it's crazy to think, but if you probably go back, my mom saved so much of my stuff, like from when I was a kid. I guess even when I have a whole trunk. It's so embarrassing. I have a toy chest still. It is a wooden toy chest, and it says Madison's Toys on it, and I've had it my entire life for 33 and a half years. But it is loaded with like my life before I turned 18. So my mom saved almost everything I made project-wise that was like paper. Like, I have so much artwork in there. And so I had poems in there. And there's one about a pig that was holding a flower. Like, what the fuck? Who talks about that in kindergarten? Me. A little pig that wanted to share a flower. And I just think it's so interesting. It's just crazy. I dare you. You're going to send me a message later. You're going to be like texting somebody like, do you have any of my childhood artwork? Like,
I've got one of those boxes too. It's at my mom's house, actually.
A lot of this
there's
stuff,
a bin of child stuff. Yeah.
It's probably
gold mine.
It probably encompasses a lot of actually who you are now. And I think maybe you too, I think I'm more authentic. I'm more myself than I've ever been. And I think as I've gotten older, I let go of a lot of the things people were holding me down, all those anchors of what people wanted me to be. I was like, I'm not going to let this drag me down. And maybe you're the same. So I think it's been really like just seeing like how I evolved, and like going through my artwork has been fun to see. Like, after all these years, even the stuff in my house reminds me like I am who I've always been. I just kind of was molded into what my family wanted me to be. And I was like, I can't be this person. So, you know, I just think art is so fucking cool. I really love art. And I, like I said, wish I could really make money off of doing more art stuff, but this is my art, my podcast and my YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you can make art for yourself, and the act of making art is so good for our brains. And
I love it.
like, it's exercising a mental muscle that then you'll use for everything, for your podcast, for your relationships, for your business, everything.
I seriously hope you enjoyed this episode because I loved recording this. The conversation was just so fun, and I want to leave you here with some of my final thoughts on this. Don't be afraid to invest in who you are in order to grow. Don't be afraid to move into a new space or create new things. Sparking creativity isn't always going to be easy, but it is literally everywhere around us. I had so much fun on this episode talking with Gabrielle and diving into how she made art her full-time income, plus how she lives her life as enriched as she can while being herself 100%. We all have the power to be who we want and explore all the things that this lifetime has to offer. You are without a doubt a badass. Don't you forget it. XOXO, you know, it's me, your girl Mads, and I will see you next Wednesday for episode number 26. Wow, number 26. See you there.